now in session. Bill, you can give us a oh, go ahead,
Mr.
Patty.
Lee, would you like to be at the staff table or at the podium?
Wherever you want.
Rock and roll wherever.
He's going to point the camera no matter where you stand.
Do half there and half over there.
Depends if you want to stand or sit.
Which side is your better side?
Well, the one that's in Florida.
Good point. You gotta click it on. No, you gotta click. There's a little switch in it. You gotta click it on.
Okay.
That?
Now.
No, nothing.
Oh, Chad's going to figure it out.
It was on. Power, there's two switches. Yeah. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Sure.
If you ever stop being a lawyer, you can do some audiovisual stuff.
Well, good evening. I sent council a memo a couple days ago regarding a census problem. And for those who have not reviewed that.
You might have to get closer, Bill.
Oh, really? What happened?
Battery went dead. Guess where you're going?
Over there?
Yep.
Over there.
Or is there a new battery? Or?
Okay.
Got the technology. Yeah. Okay.
And you're going so well on that too. I mean, like you were like 4 sentences in and stuff.
I know.
Yeah, that's great.
I've never worn a battery out that quick.
I bet you have.
See, now I'm talking about-
I'm using my inside voice right now.
Is this working?
It is.
There you go.
Okay.
Bill's back.
Very good. Anyway, back in April, you received census numbers from Patty Dubois, the city clerk, and when she reports to you after she receives numbers from the federal government, the U.S. Census Bureau. And something she noticed was that it appeared the population of Ward 3 had dropped between 800 and 900 people, which would be about a third. And that doesn't make any sense because the population of Ward 3 is remarkably stable. And so she and I spoke, and I spoke with Steve Daly, the city manager. We decided we better investigate this because if you redraw your ward boundaries, as you're required to as a result of the decennial census, and you'd have to carve out significant areas to make the numbers balance, and it looked like it would put counselor and I guess school board member from Ward 3 and Ward 4 potentially in the same ward. Anyway, so we looked into this, contacted Colby, got a copy of the data that it had provided to the Census Bureau, 149 pages showing 1,946 students there. And by the way, college students for census purposes are considered to reside at the college. That's just, they have to come up with rules so they don't get counted twice. And anyway, Colby's data appeared to be in order, and when we looked at the numbers we got and we compared it to what Colby had provided, it of course did not make any sense. So we then started looking into what sort of review process might there be with the U.S. Census Bureau, and going through the large federal bureaucracy can take some time in getting to the right person. Eventually, there is a review process, which is PCGQR, which stands for Population Count Group Quarter Review. It's a special one-time review process that was just created, and it's to deal with undercounts in what are called group quarters, and group quarters would be colleges, nursing homes, prisons, relatively small areas where large numbers of people reside. And I cannot explain to you why group quarters were undercounted, but it's a common problem. It's not just in Waterville. Anyway, there is a review process, and they just started accepting reviews last week. We filed for a review last week. When you ask how long is it going to take to get the results, That's where it gets a little vague. Well, it could take several months. We also contacted U.S. Senator Angus King's office to have them work on getting the Census Bureau to expedite the process. Because we probably have a greater need to have quick results than a lot of other areas do, since we're under a mandate to have to redraw our boundaries. But the wrinkle, so we have our review process pending. The wrinkle in that is that under our charter, which was written with no idea that there would ever be a pandemic, of course, it says that the census results are what are to be used in redistricting. And even though we have a review process, this PCGQR review process, the census results that come in, they are final. And you might say, well, that's ridiculous. Why is there a review process if, in fact, the census results cannot be changed? The significance of they'll give us updated numbers. It doesn't change the census, but what the numbers are used for is that each year the U.S. Census Bureau comes up with population estimates, and they will use the correct number, the higher number, to come up with these estimates. And that may make a difference for us, I guess, potentially in revenue sharing, federal dollars and so forth, having a correct population. So, but the problem is, so we've got a review process pending, but we have a charter that says you've got to use the decennial census results, which has Ward 3 dropping by between 800 and 900 people. And also has a variation in Ward 6, because it appears there was about a 159 resident undercount in Ward 6, and that's where the Colby's downtown dorm is. They only counted a few people there. So you have before you two choices. You can say, okay, I will just follow the census results, and direct the city clerk to continue with the process of redistricting and come back to you with a new map. And if that's the case, we need to be moving on it quite quickly, because ward caucuses have to take place on or before August 10th. And of course, to pass an ordinance takes some time in and of itself. And so you could tell us tonight, yeah, go ahead and do that. Or, I thought, okay, is there another way around this so we can actually, when we hear the PCGQR results, that we can use them. The possible way of doing that would be to, this summer, propose a charter amendment to change the language of that little obscure section of the charter to allow the redistricting to be based on either the decennial census results or any review thereof. And if that passed, which I would like to think it would, then when we get the results from the government from this review, and after the charter is passed, then you can immediately redistrict according to those updated numbers. And the reality is, there may not even have to be any lines changed, but if there is anything, it would be relatively minor. That is the second possibility. The decision is yours, and we're not asking you to take a vote on this. You just tell us what you want us to do, and we will do it. And you can say, use the census results and just get on with it. Fine, that's what we'll do, because that's what the charter mandates. That's supported by state law. At the same time, we do have the authority under state law to amend our charter in this regard, to change the language, and the change would be to accommodate this extremely unusual situation where we have received numbers which, to the best of our ability, appear to be substantially incorrect. And then when we get updated numbers from the census people, we use those for redistricting purposes.
Rick.
Without going through the acronym, the PC group.
Good enough. That's good enough.
What was their time frame on resolution or some result from that?
And I asked that very question. They said, we'd like to be able to do that within 90 days.
Could you repeat the question? Bill, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear it. It wasn't spoken in this microphone.
Sorry, my apologies. The PC group, how long did they say that it would take for them to give us an answer?
I was told 3 months, perhaps, but it could take longer. And that's, of course, somewhat indefinite. And that's, and I was in communication with Senator King's office again today, and they have forwarded the information to the congressional liaison, to the Census Bureau, to see about having our request expedited.
Okay. Mayor, if I can continue? So given that, that puts us into October, November timeframe. Would it be legal for us to amend the charter to adopt the redistricting after the general election? On the next scheduled meeting after the general election, so that for the 23 cycle is where I was going. Because if we are pushed into X months, we've campaigned in wrong streets if we're gonna
Right.
go the other way. But
Yes.
you know what I mean? So is that a legal option? So 90 days out, we're going, if the option is there that we can redistrict after the general election of the given year that we're currently in, if we went with a charter amendment,
So
23.
I think if you go with the charter amendment, then nothing changes. And the moment we go through, then we could put those census numbers into place and redistrict automatically for the
Right.
upcoming, I mean,
Right.
by next June's primary, we'd have already been hopefully already redistricted.
Right.
And
So-
if,
And so,
I have a question.
Hold on.
Hold on.
I've got a couple people, Tom. You gotta give me a second. Go ahead, Bill, and then
Okay.
Councilor Green.
if perchance, after you do the redistricting, somebody finds out they're serving an award that they're no longer in, the charter has a provision in it that allows you to complete your term, even if the redistricting moves you
Okay.
into
Okay.
another ward.
Which is, I think at this point, our best scenario. I mean, if you go
Yeah.
with the numbers that we have now, we know they're not real.
Right.
If we're gonna be drawing out numbers and
Yeah.
we're gonna squeeze people out, no, I think we should wait.
What do
Yeah.
you, so what do you mean by we know they're not real? You mean
We know that they're not
the
accurate.
decennial
They're,
census?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
we know that the census is not accurate.
Right. So my question is, when can the charter, I mean, the charter can only be amended at the election, right? Or can it be amended earlier?
Depending on the timing, you could call a special election. The difficulty with special elections is getting people to show up. And
Yeah.
looking at the timing of things now and the amount of time involved in printing the ballot and getting something passed and printing the ballot, November is a very convenient time.
Right, but it would, if we did a special election, it would solve the problem of potential illegality of going ahead without having made the charter amendment with the election, with the districts the way they are.
Well, the chart.
Could I ask a question? I think, isn't there a requirement, a minimum turnout requirement to amend the charter of 30%?
30% of those who voted in the last gubernatorial election.
Correct,
We had
which-
a charter revision once, and the council put it out to the voters in June, at the June primary date, and it passed overwhelmingly, but the number who voted was
Okay.
too small, and it therefore failed, and it was then interestingly put out again at the November election, and at that time, the charter revision failed. But there is a potential problem when you try to line up a general popular vote other than when everybody thinks of voting. November.
Right, but
Yeah.
because it does seem silly to go through the redistricting, like Counselor Foss says, when we know that there's a genuine error that needs to be corrected, and it's
And-
under review already.
And Patty can give you more details on the numbers because she's the one who discovered something that was an anomaly and started asking questions. So.
I'm gonna let Tom ask his question. Tom, go ahead.
yeah,
It's-
thank
Is it
you,
Tom or-
Bill. So let me make sure that I understand this. One of the proposals that's on the table here would have us, so one possible outcome would be that we could run the election with the districts as they stand in November, and then after November, once we have we would then need to pass the charter revision, and that would be in the November election, or we would be able to amend the census data after that. Please clarify that for me. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I joined a little late.
Sure. Okay. One of the possibilities would be you do not redistrict at this time. You just
Correct,
wait.
yeah.
And if you have not redistricted, then the boundaries stay the same. The charter also says that if you don't redistrict within 6 months of when you're notified by the city clerk of the census results, you don't get paid until you do.
Okay.
Keep
well,
that in mind. But the timing of things would be, you don't, with this other possibility, you do not redistrict now. You just leave the districts as they are while we have our review pending. But we also then pass a charter amendment, which would go out to the voters in the November election. And if the voters pass that amendment, as soon as it's passed and as soon as we have the results of the census review, then our city clerk will make whatever proposed revisions are necessary, and then you'd have a redistricting ordinance before you to pass. And as soon as that passes, then those are the new lines, new boundary lines.
And how dramatic would the redistricting be if we were to use the amended census, what we believe to be the correct data? How significant would it would be minimal? Is that correct?
I'm
Yes.
going to defer to Patty, but she's affirmatively shaking her head that it would be minimal.
Minimal.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And I guess
Okay.
follow-up to that would be, how significant will the boundaries be changed if we do it on the basis of Ward 3's population being reduced by 1/3 and a 10% difference in Ward 6?
It's a huge change.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Counselor Frankie.
Excuse me, if we decide to do the hold off redistricting and go ahead and use the old districts right now and put the charter amendment on for November, what kind of legal liability does the city have for not following the charter?
Well, what the charter says, you're supposed to redistrict within 6 months of being notified. It then goes on to say that if you don't, then you don't get paid. That's the ramification. You don't get paid until you do it. So it contemplates that in fact is a possibility.
So the 6-month time period ends October 19th.
Something like that,
So there would
yes.
be a few week period between that end date and then it going to the voters and hopefully being approved. So it would be a short period of time that you would in fact be in violation.
And you're referring to the like $350 that we get quarterly or whatever, Bill? Is that what you're talking
Correct.
Yeah, the money that none of us need.
We get paid?
about? Okay.
So my follow-up then, Bill, is what about from the general population? Is there, are we likely to be sued by candidates who feel that they've run in the wrong district or anything like that?
Well, I don't see that because the ordinance in effect will be the ordinance that we have right now. In other words, until you change the ordinance, what we have right now is what you have to follow. And the charter does contemplate in that it says, it says you are supposed to do that within 6 months. But then it also says, if you haven't done it within 6 months, you don't get paid until you do. So, I mean, that possibility was contemplated. And
Well,
but that's your choice.
so the other ramifications, the other ramifications would be if the charter amendment does not pass, then but you're suggesting it would be the same. We would just end up using the disputed census numbers anyway.
Right. If the voters vote it down, okay, you tried, then go ahead and redraw the boundaries as are necessary, and any elections that take place after that would have to follow the new boundaries.
Which would be after the
Thank you.
general election
And,
anyway.
and it's contemplated that, of course, whenever this takes place, that you redraw the boundaries, that you may have somebody who's a counselor for a particular ward who finds himself or herself residing in a different ward. That, of course, can happen.
That would be me.
Yeah.
That may
I mean,
happen to two of them.
That's a problem, but that, in my mind, is a lesser problem than the vote dilution and the distortion of the representation in town here, and that's really, I think, the big concern. I mean, redrawing lines, that sort of thing happens, but this kind of disruption, where a third of the population of Ward 3 wasn't correctly counted, and the representation ramifications of that, I think that is what is unacceptable and should, in my perspective as the counselor from Ward 3, is something that should be mitigated in whatever legal way is possible here. Yeah, I mean, payment are small stipend notwithstanding.
Tom, I think that the sense of the council is that they want the numbers to be right. We're not really worried about getting paid whatever length of time that takes. We want to make sure that the city's got the right numbers, that we're drawing the right boundaries, because we're not going to do this again for like 10 years. So,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Jay?
Go ahead.
Is there anybody that's in these wards that are running this November that may not be in the ward that they're running in?
Clay Pack.
Well,
Well,
He'll-
I am, I suppose.
I mean,
he'll probably end up in Ward 3. The big change.
Well, Ward 3 is going to expand, not shrink. It's going to affect Rebecca's ward, is
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
But she's not running this year.
So what happens if we we keep the districts as they are, and the motion, the charter amendment fails at the election, and we don't have the review yet?
Well, if the charter amendment fails, then you're just going to redistrict according to the census, because the charter remains as it is, which says that you have to use the decennial results.
Even if we haven't had the review?
Or you just
Yeah,
not
'cause-
keep not getting paid until the review
Oh.
comes through and
Yeah.
you miss out on
Okay.
$350.
But
but
even,
we
but-
can't change it even if it does come through.
correct,
Yeah.
Mr. Morris, yes. If the
What-
charter amendment fails, there's no reason to not redistrict immediately, regardless of what the census review shows.
Because we won't be able to
Because
change
the
it.
charter
Charter
would,
dictates
would
what
conti-
we
would
use.
continue to say you have to use the decennial results. And the review, the amendment we're thinking of, and would be just basically to say to use the decennial census results or the results obtained after any review thereof, or something to that effect. And contemplating that the present circumstance where we are having a review performed.
So-
Now, if for some reason that neither Colby nor the city has been able to determine, it turns out that the population really did decrease by 1/3, then, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Then we use the decennial results.
That seems highly unlikely.
That's certainly not the case, yeah.
900 people did not just like up and move out of one section of our town and we didn't notice. Yeah,
No.
so. All right. What do you guys want to do? Give them some direction.
Well, we can't
I
vote.
think
We're not-
what-
it's not a
you know, it
budget
sounds
thing.
like- I like
the
Yeah,
November
num-
thing.
Yeah, number
Right.
two
Sounds like we want to just
I
go
don't
ahead.
want, I don't want anything unfair. I don't want anything unfair. The districts are gonna be equal, and we all know that the census is off, so let's make things right.
I don't think we lose.
No,
I mean, no
no,
option.
this is a no-brainer.
Is that the consensus of the council?
Oh, I'm sorry, Claude's hand is up. Let me give Claude another opportunity.
I just want to caution everybody that while I think Attorney Lee's proposal to move ahead in the hopes that we get good numbers from from our review request. It may well be that the Washington bureaucrats deny our request, and we're stuck with the numbers that we have. So while we would like it to be fair, there is always the possibility that it will not be. We need to just keep that in mind as we go through the process.
Yeah, but there's no way around that, is there, Claude? I mean,
No.
nothing ventured, nothing gained. That's just,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, but if the bureaucrats tell us we can't do what we would like to do, then we're just out of luck on that.
And you are absolutely correct. And this is a one-time, and it's the first time they've had this type of review allowed. So we don't have any precedent to see how they've treated any of these in the past. And they just started accepting the applications last week.
Great,
That
we're
seemed
gonna
a-
be on CNN.
and we got our application in last week. So we are at the front of the line. We just don't know how many people are also at the front of the line. But we will simultaneously work with our U.S. Senator's office to have them go through whatever process they can to see about our application being expedited. Because there'd be many districts applying who wouldn't necessarily have this ward district redrawing type of situation that we have. And so if they have to wait 6 months, it's no big deal. For us, time that does make a difference. So,
No, I think with the help of senators, and I know that Scott's been over there at Angus King's office, and he's pretty good, so.
Scott
Scott Wilkinson is phenomenal.
Yep, and he is extremely prompt. He gets back to me immediately, unlike the U.S. Census Bureau. And he seems experienced, very knowledgeable about what
appreciate
needs to be
Scott. Scott
done
is a good-
to try to push
Scott's a
us
good
to the
man.
front of the line. So,
No.
All right.
So, yeah, option 2.
okay, thank you very much. I mean, this is a very unusual situation, and at first it seemed like we're stuck with it, but then I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought, well, maybe we do this, and do this, and we have another possibility. Okay,
Works. Thank you.
thank you very much.
And Bill, for saving the city. Thank you.
Send us the bill. All right, Steve, what's next?
I feel like we should give him a cape.
Cake?
Cape.
It's really a matter of choice, Mr. Mayor. I know that. The superintendent is here with some of the school board members to talk about their request for additional funding for the budget. We have 3 things we really need to talk about tonight. One is an overview of the budget as to where we stand right now. The second is the school department's budget request, and then the EMS service and the overview of where we are and what we're proposing to do with that. So
So why don't we
you
start with
choose the order, please.
I would start with the overview of our budget, then go to the school, so that everyone can go home, and then we'll deal with chief.
Very good.
I mean, unless you guys want to stay for the ambulance stuff, it's pretty good.
Riveting. Trying to help you out here, chief. Just saying, you know. You don't feel it. You're not feeling it, are you?
Mayor Coelho,
Yes, ma'am.
Joan Phillips Sandy has her hand raised. Should I allow her to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Share my screen now.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on the matter of the redistricting, given that I'm in Ward 3.
Okay.
If the charter amendment doesn't pass, even if we have the new numbers tomorrow, we can't use them. Am I right about that?
That is correct.
Yes, you're correct.
So So in other words, even if we find out how terribly wrong these are, and even if my ward, I don't think we lost as many as 800 people, although I've often said we have more deer than people in this ward. So unless the charter, we need to make that really clear, it seems to me, that unless the charter amendment passes, even if we have good numbers, we can't use them.
That is correct.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure that message is really clear. And I will be listening on the school presentation, and if you have any questions of me as chair, I'm here, but I really believe it's in Eric's capable hands and some other board members who are present.
All right, we'll
Yeah.
see if that.
Hey, Joan,
What?
Joan, if I, as the Ward 3 counselor, just to speak to your concern, you know, I think I'm going to do my best as the counselor in Ward 3 to make sure that, you know, presumably the bulk of those 800 or 900 people were Colby students, that they know what's at stake and how important it is for them to turn out and vote in favor of the amendment so that they are going to be adequately represented. It's really, I think, a matter of making sure that Ward 3, the people who weren't properly counted understand what's happening. I'm certainly going to do my utmost to make sure that message is conveyed to those constituents.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. The thing is, we could really use some additional residential area in our ward. We really could. There used to be. We used to have several more streets in Ward 3 when I first ran. And I think looking ahead to the next 10 years in terms of getting candidates, having more residential streets would be a good thing.
Yeah, you're right, but having a miscount is not really the way to do that.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. Thanks very much.
All right, Steve, set us up on the budget.
Says you disabled participant screen share.
Not I.
Not me either.
You think they'd give it to me with the ADHD? I can manage it. I mean, it's just.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like this. My kids they're always like, "How can you read a book and listen to the radio?" I'm like, "Trust me, I got this."
The wife can do that.
Oh yeah, love it. And I'll hold a full conversation with you.
There's like 6 squirrels running around that head.
Yep.
They're all multitasking.
Always.
Nicholas, she's, huh?
No.
Not yet.
I do not have them. It's through the back.
Who's the new guy? Who's the new guy?
city clerk and then his photo thing. That looks totally different.
Who's the new guy on the TV?
Alice in the middle of the Brady Bunch over there.
God. It is 2022.
Technical difficulty.
We gathered. What?
It's in the cloud.
Somebody call Scotty to beam us all up. I mean, we can go old school way.
Yeah,
Can
we
you
can
get,
do that
can you
whole
get
paper
this
thing.
on
There
camera?
we
There
go.
we go. Like, listen.
Can't see it, but there it is.
Patty, I'd like to see you read off that TV from there. Just, give me the numbers off that. In the decibels, too. You'll beat me with that laptop.
Uh-oh.
Well, I'm saving gas this way.
There you are, on the bike.
Not really.
It's for the people at home.
Yeah. See, my problem is my bike gets the same mileage as my truck does. Yeah, it's got the biggest engine Yamaha made in that year.
Chad, back to this. Just zoom in on this thing.
I'll hold it and
We've
then I'll
got-
scroll it down
How many
I'll
IT
scroll
people
it
do we
down the
have in
lane.
this room? What,
We,
three at least?
we have at least 3 IT people in this room, and not one of us is in control.
Nope.
Just said that it didn't recognize my USB anymore. Okay, hold on.
That's fantastic. This is fantastic.
It's not recognizing my USB.
Let me just bring it up on this one, Patty.
Yeah.
This go over here.
I mean,
Okay, we can start.
We can start because you all have this page that I'm going to refer to.
the one that says we're in the hole,
Look at us.
is
The
it this
one
page?
that's dated June 10th, top right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Blue.
Oh,
So it's this one.
oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So that you can all see, it is this one. And we're in the hole. There it is.
No, that's the wrong one.
We're gonna fix that soon.
That's the wrong one. It's the other one.
I feel as this is gonna be quicker for me to run downtown, get some copies made, and disseminate them.
Speed this meeting up real quick. I'm
responsible for the content, not the mechanics.
Benny Hill theme, golden.
This is a fantastic way to run out my
Yeah.
my thought.
We're still gonna have to have a special meeting this month, so
You're-
enjoy.
Oh, that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, because we have to vote on the budget second time.
Oh,
That'll be fantastic.
That can be, as soon as you finish that, you can finish, that's the meeting you. Where you gonna be?
Why aren't you going?
Well, like my boss's boss is coming out of town, and like, that's kind of. Thank you.
Oh, that is a big deal. I'll give you that one. Yeah.
Well, as long as we get at least 5 votes on the budget, doesn't matter. I mean, I'll do it, if you want to have the meeting Tuesday, I'll do it right on Thursday, we can be done with this right now.
Call a special meeting after the.
Thank you, Patty.
You got it.
That's what I mean.
But you gotta schedule it today.
Yeah, schedule it for the Thursday.
Right. You can't just drop, you gotta have 7
This,
days out.
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this.
Okay, this is a rundown of the budget that is showing a number of the adjustments that we've made since it was first taken up by the Finance Committee.
Can you guys read that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Okay. Done deal. Go ahead, Steve. They're in your hand, by the way.
He smacks you, there's not gonna be any witnesses.
Go ahead.
Starting with the revenue picture, the city revenue has had adjustments made to it based on reprojections from the finance director and the assistant city manager. The school revenue is what came through on the document given to us by the school department. the TIF tax levy is the amount of money that's going to be collected from the various TIFs this year. And then the available tax levy is what remains of the gross tax levy after the TIF levy is taken out of it. That available tax levy is calculated at a mill rate of 25.50, which is the same mill rate that we have this year. Then the city cost, we've made a number of adjustments to the city cost. It was, I don't remember what number it was, but we've had to add in the cost of providing ambulance service from within our fire department. We've also subtracted about $200,000 in various departmental reductions that are essentially things that can be put off for a year or more. The TIF financing cost is a calculation where we have to send the money that was taken aside from the tax levy for the TIFs. We have to put that into a separate fund, so that's why that number's there. The county tax is shown here. That's an increase that is, I think it's in the range of 9.3%. And then the school cost is shown here at $28 million, and I believe that is the number that we were last given by the school district. So at that point, when you compare the revenues and the costs, we have a shortfall of about $2.5 million. After that, we applied $1.68 million of the fund balance, which reduced the fund balance to 13.4%. We also applied $165,000 of ARPA funding to cover the cost of a police lieutenant and a mental health worker in the police department. Then we got to the Finance Committee recommendations down below, where it was recommended that we increase the mill rate by 50 cents, making it $26. And that we should use an additional amount of fund balance of $400,000, which reduced the fund balance to 12.7%. So we had a total change there of $775, which was additional revenue, which left us with an excess over cost of $57,000. Then the Finance Committee met again, and changes we've made after the Finance Committee last met are shown below. We were able to reduce the contingency on the build project from $250,000 to $150,000. So we picked up another $100,000 in revenue there. And we refined the fire department operating budget insofar as the EMS, the new EMS cost is concerned. And we were able to reduce that by $57,000 based on timing the hirings of additional people. So with that, adding those two numbers to the $57,000 above, we ended up with an excess of $214,000. And then we had to add in the difference between the original subsidy proposed by the school department and the new proposal from them, and that difference was $405,000, so it left us with a shortfall of $191,000. And that's where we sit today.
All right, so, but that $400,000 that the school is asking for, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, that is what you've started to negotiate for the union contracts for the teachers, correct?
Correct.
And that will get our teachers how much more of a percentage?
We're looking at 9.68%.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me turn this up. Oh, sorry, Eric, you gotta go up there. I'm just asking questions at this point. I mean, we might as well segue right into the school.
So Board Member Trinwood's gonna hand out a new summary expenditure sheet
Thank you.
and a new summary revenue sheet.
Thank you.
Those are the exact same two sheets I handed out the first time I came, except as Steve mentioned, the numbers have gone up. And interestingly, the numbers have gone up exactly by what Steve reports right here, $405,775. And we're in the unique situation, and believe it or not, in my 22 and a half years of being superintendent, I could not sit or stand in front of the city council and tell you that that is a direct cost associated with teacher contracts. You couldn't ever separate it out, but because the only thing we did differently since I was last here to report to you is increase teachers' salaries again, to get them up because of this situation. And you might remember this graphic. I don't depend on technology because I can't run it all that well, so I depend on my colored markers and all these other things. But yellow shows me which of the 7 schools in this area has the lowest salary at that level. This is Waterville. And if I flick the page, this is Waterville. And if I flick the page, this is Waterville. Of the 7 communities, I won't say exclusively we're the lowest, but 90%, 95% of the time, Waterville has the lowest salaries. That's becoming a major problem for us. Teachers are hard enough to get, just like your police officers are hard enough to get, and your firemen are hard enough to get. And if you're not running comparable salaries and you're giving me 7 communities within traveling distance in this area, I'm gonna go to where I'm gonna get the most salary. Because frankly, the travel's not that great to get to any one. It's one of the reasons I came to this area. They said, hey, if you file up as an administrator, you got at least 7 or 8 other schools within traveling distance. So I'm standing here in front of you for the first time in 21 years saying, if you vote to increase this amount, you are giving that directly to teachers for salaries. I couldn't say that ever before. So you're right, our budget has gone up. If you go to the second page on what was just handed out to you, that's your summary revenue. Remember, that sheet is designed to go and find the number in the little lower right-hand side box.
Yep.
And that's the number that we're asking for, an increase in local taxes to support this teacher contract.
So, I just need this so I can do my numbers here. I've had quite a few conversations with counselors over the past couple weeks, and Counselor Green and I specifically a lot over schools. I think we've been pretty much on the same page since the beginning of this budget process that we wanted to make sure that teachers are getting paid. It has been in the past where we've worked a budget, and then somewhere in between that budget, you work out your teachers' salaries, and then we sort of just have to eat it the next time around. I think this is much better. I think at some point, and we've discussed this, I think the city needs to adopt not an ordinance, but a way of thinking where we know that we took in X amount of dollars in property tax, that number should just be 50-50 and move on. That you're gonna have to learn to work within that 50%, which you've never gotten before. And the city, on the other side, is also going to have to live and learn to live in it within its means at 50%. So that every year it's about a phone call to say, hey, what does that assessment look like it's going to be this year, so that you can plan for that long before you had to speak to us about it. We have a shortfall. I know that in your budget, there's is it $114,000 for plowing?
100.
So it's straight 100 for
100.
plowing?
Straight 100.
Which we're going to take on, we're going to do the plowing. So you don't need that $100,000 for plowing. So I've talked to Councilor Green. Now, there's no way for us to, we already have to raise it 50 cents. In we're still in a pandemic, apparently. As we come out of this, inflation has hit everyone. To go up $500,000 compared to everything that we've had to go through over the last few years is not an easy ask, but it's a lighter ask than what could be happening and what is happening in surrounding areas. But taking away your 100,000, making you not have to pay for plowing, you've come back and asked for an additional 405,000. You originally asked for 730,000. Can we meet in the middle? I mean, if we gave you $940,000, I'm hoping that you can find that other $100,000 in your budget to pay the rest of that increase for the teachers.
I can guarantee you that we would try very hard.
Councilor Green.
So at the last board meeting, Monday, right? Time is flying fast because we were here last Thursday and we talked about the importance of raising teacher salaries, right? And I think, we're all in agreement. This budget is about raising wages for people, police, fire, city workers, and teachers. And that's about a combined $2 million price tag. And so I think we are very committed to this. When you presented last week, you didn't say anything about an assistant superintendent, but you did vote to hire that position out of ARPA funds. So we can't fund the full 405 additional that you're asking for. But I think your teachers really deserve that 9%. So I'd like to see you talk about using ARPA funds to fund those positions, so that the teachers can get the wages that they really deserve, that we need to have so we can attract teachers to this district.
Councilor Foss.
To that degree, though, is how does any project that we're funding out of this ARPA funds maintain that funding after they've used that? So that's one of those things that they would have to look at. If they're going to fund a position, they got to be able to do the longevity, because the first, $50,000 to $100,000 washes away and it's over. Now they got to fund it after that. So I don't know if I like that way of thinking. I get your point. It's valid.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got to figure it out. But if I may, I've got two
Please,
questions.
yes.
Steve, this mill rate increase, does that include the 405, or what's this piece of paper?
It does, but it doesn't balance the budget.
Okay. Eric, back in the
If I may,
Hold on.
For the love of God.
Okay, you gotta let him finish. He's got a couple questions. Hold on, Cleat. Go ahead.
Eric, back in the 90s, I was a taxpayer in this town a lot more than I am right now, and I'm not trying to pick a fight. That's not my intent with this. It's just a serious question. And how long you been here? And don't kick me because I don't know. How long you been superintendent of the schools?
Just finished 21 years. I'm on my 22nd year.
Would have been before you. Back in the early 90s, mid 90s, ratio was 33 to 36%. We said that last time you guys were here. What changed to bring you guys up to the 46, 47 percentile of the entire budget between then and now? How did that number creep from 33 to 36% of the entire budget, the schools, on the taxation side, to 46 to 47%? I'm asked. I want him to answer, and I appreciate it. Yeah, but I want him to answer.
I would say, and we have admitted this, we probably negotiated too hard with our teachers and held those salaries back, and so we had a lot of catching up to do.
Okay.
You might remember the last time we negotiated with teachers, we did what we considered at the time a very lucrative 3-year contract.
Eric, please turn your microphone on.
Oh, yeah, you got to talk into it. There you go.
As a negotiating group, we've decided that we probably negotiated too hard, And so we fell behind 6 years ago. We signed a 3-year, what we thought was very lucrative contract that would bring our teachers to the top. Well, it didn't. What happened was the other districts in this area started doing better. And so after 3 years, we were even further behind. So now we're left in this situation. That obviously eats more percentage-wise of what we have for resources within the city. That would be one reason I would give you for that.
Okay.
There are some other things. Medical insurance, of course, is out of sight. The cost of medical insurance, electricity. We pay more for electricity in Waterville Public Schools than we do for oil. That may be getting a little bit closer now that the price of oil is up, but I tell people that and they were shocked that we pay more for electricity than we do for oil. But all of those utilities are going up and up and up. And our ability to pay is going down and down and down. So we're depending more and more.
One final question, if I may. 2 years ago, you implemented the driver's ed program. How'd that fare for you guys as far as back when you brought that to us and said, hey, I want to do this, your belief back then was that you would increase your enrollment. Has that in fact happened?
Well, the real reason for having driver ed was because we also implemented an experimental computer science curriculum. And the design of that computer science curriculum was to have kids graduate with marketable skills. Because the design was that these are kids who don't have resources, their families don't have resources to go on to college yet. So they need somewhere to go get a job, and then hopefully the employer will help them get courses towards a degree, and then that will encourage them or give them a tidbit of what could be if they continued. So that was a design around that, because we looked at what we have for a population. And then we said, well, if they don't have licenses, these 18-year-olds that are graduating aren't going to be able to get to Augusta or Bangor. They can only go to where they can walk or take a bus to. So we said, we really got to provide them with a license so that they could get to a bigger market. So that was the real reason for that. Our population has been dropping steady, and there's nothing to predict that it's going to stop over the last 10 years. In 1985, I came to Waterville as the assistant principal. We had 1,150 students in that high school. We are under 500 today.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Pam, you got an answer?
Well, I was just gonna.
I need you, sorry.
There's absolutely a direct correlation to the funding for the City of Waterville schools to LD1. I happened to be in the legislature during that time where the legislature was moving up the amount of money that they were going to be giving to public schools under the incentive that the schools would take less money from the communities to lower the property tax burden on schools. LD1 said that the citizens voted for that 55% of the total cost of education in the state of Maine would be paid for by the legislature. While I was in the legislature, it actually got up to 53%, the highest it had been. During that time, which is directly to the time you're talking about, we went down, we, as Waterville, we were one of 2 communities in the state of Maine that actually did exactly what we were supposed to do, which we took much less money from the city and went down to that low point of 35, 36%, because we got a much larger number from the state. Waterville benefits a lot from the funding formula that has been established by the legislature. And we would never, ever complain about the money we get from the state. We get far more than 50%, 55% of our total cost of education. We're actually closer to 70% of our funding comes from the state. But that's what happened. We went way down, and we took the money we got from the state. I agree with Eric. I was on the board at the time. We over-negotiated teachers' contracts. We continue to be very frugal and careful, but that's the actual history of where that time came from. Now, as different legislatures and different governors came into being, they never did reach 55%, and they actually went back down to sometimes 47, 48, and it's the amount of money that's allocated from the state budget to education, and the LD1 says it's supposed to be 55% of the total cost of education, and then divided through the formula. And Waterville benefited enormously, and the city taxpayers benefited as it was designed to do. And that's actually the real history of why we were at those numbers.
Counselor Frankie. Thank you, Pat.
Well, I'd like to thank the superintendent and the school board for putting forth an ask that envisions substantial raises for the teachers here in Waterville. One of the things that we set as a priority in our recent council retreat was to improve education. And I think this is an excellent step in that direction. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'm sorry I can't put my hand up.
No, go ahead, Klepak.
But so to echo Claude, I'd like to thank the board and superintendent for all their work, particularly the superintendent for his legendary hours that you put in. The question I have, I don't have the benefit of that sheet in front of me that you've handed out to everyone, which has the comparatives of Waterville with our surrounding communities in terms of salary. But I do know for a fact that salary is not the only metric whereby Waterville is unfavorably compared to our neighboring communities. For example, I am a participant, an organizer of the math camp that's going to be running this summer out of the Albert S. Hall School with a couple of the other employees from the school district. And I in that program, we have a materials funding for the visual arts of $3,000 for 3 weeks of programming, basically a month of programming for 20 students. To compare that number to the number for materials for the visual arts program for the George Mitchell School, that's approximately $2,200 for the entire school year for 520 students. That breaks down to $4.23 per student, or less than 12 cents per student per class period. If you compare that number, for example, to the community of Clinton, which I don't know the median income comparison of Clinton to Waterville off the top of my head, but I do know that that same number in Clinton is $1,500 across 280 students, which works out to be about $6.50 per student per year. Clinton is able to do 50% better in terms of material resources for that important programming compared to Waterville. So now to my question, which is how do you justify I would just like to hear the rationale and justification for the assistant superintendent, because clearly there is a need for the assistant superintendent. I'm not necessarily questioning the fundamental need, but I want to understand the broad picture of all of the the needs and deficits that Waterville has in terms of school. How does the assistant superintendent, the need for that role, overshadow other very real material needs that the school district has that would directly impact the students, right? I mean, whatever material costs, those are materials that are in the students' hands, guiding their experience.
Well, let me say this. Is this Tom I'm talking to?
Did all that come through?
Is this Tom?
Hey, how you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well, thank you. I will say this about that art number. It was what the teacher asked for, and it hadn't been expended the previous year. So that's how budgets...
I can say that's not, I know for a fact that's not true, because that particular teacher is the one that's involved in the math camp, which is why I know all these numbers, and was not engaged in any kind of budget request or anything like that. I'm not pointing to that. What I'm looking for is I want you to help me understand why the assistant superintendent is the correct expenditure for the ARPA funds. That's what I want.
Why the assistant superintendent is what?
The correct expenditure for these ARPA funds. Why is that the right way to be spending the money when there are other material deficits?
Well, again, I'm not in agreement on the art supply because we didn't cut that number. It's not like we said, oh, you got way too much in there, we're going to cut that number. That was what was asked for from the building. And it's also a number that was still money in it the previous year. So I guess I'm at a loss as to who did put the number in then. The number was exactly the same as it was the previous year.
Yeah.
Which wasn't totally spent.
I was raising that number simply as an example. I don't want to get lost in the weeds of the details of that particular number. That's not my real question here. My deeper question is about the assistant superintendent and how a position like that is, a level or two removed from the direct student experience, how that takes priority over other potential expenditures that would have a more direct impact on student experience. That's my question.
Yeah, I don't agree with that assumption on your part that it'll have more direct services. Matter of fact, the discussion we had around that position was there are an awful lot of social emotional learning issues that we need to address that I can't get to. I can't direct it district-wide, and I want this person to do that. We also want this person to look at funding to see if there isn't some alternative funding out there that would help us with some of these things. I see it as a position that, if we work it right, may even pay for itself. Now, that's a grand jump, I realize, but it's possible. But it certainly will help us address programming that we are seeing a need for. We have so many unregulated children developed over the past 2 years that we need somebody who is going to develop programming that is going to bring our children back to regular behavior.
Counselor Green.
So I want to fast forward a little bit too and come back to my point before about getting teachers to a competitive level, and I'm just wondering, with the hire of an assistant superintendent, you mentioned that person potentially could be finding new revenue. What is the plan going forward? Because of course, this year, the whole city we're down to a very razor thin margin. We've taken as much as we can out of the unassigned fund balance. We've raised taxes, but what's our end game as far as, the next few years, getting teachers, continuing to build their wages and supporting that new administrative position?
So I missed the question in there somewhere.
What's the plan for catching up? And for instance, if you did use some of the ARPA money now to pay teachers more, then would that be sustainable with the projections of revenue that the assistant superintendent might bring in?
Well, you never know for sure. I'm in hopes that it will. As Pam mentioned, we do get a very good revenue from the state based on our funding and our need. What the state does is look at each community and see the number of children that you have to educate, takes your entire, what they call your wealth, which is your valuation, and they divide that by the number of children to say you've got so much wealth per child. And then from that, they rank order you in relation to what percentage of that revenue do you need in order to educate those children. So we have a very large percentage of free and reduced lunch students, which means economically they're depressed, which turns around and the state compensates us for that by providing more of the money. So as I used to say to people when we were having this argument before, the 55% became law, or before they were funding it 55, don't complain about that too loudly, because we're receiving about 70% right now. Now, if they moved it to 55, we'd get even more than 70%. But we're a high receiver because of our population. So do I think we can maintain it? Yes. I'm not one to put something in and think this is a 1 year, ride high for a year and then axe everything.
Well, we've talked a lot about how great it is for the city and the school board to have more communication and joint meetings. And, we had one this year that was, really productive. And we talked about the need for the teachers' wages to rise. I really think it's important for us to continue that relationship so that we're communicating about what the needs are. I do find it troubling that we had a meeting last week, and then this week, the needs are suddenly, have changed. So I understand we have a lot of emergencies this year and a lot of last-minute requests, but maybe not a lot, but a few. So, but I just think it's really essential for the city to get on an even keel with planning and projecting what our expenses will be. And so I hope that we will have a more of communication in the coming year about this so that we can really be proactive in figuring out how we're going to get the resources we need for our students.
I don't like the last minute stuff either.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this was the end of a 3-year contract, and so we're in the process of negotiating it. Next year and the year after, assuming that we do settle on another 3-year contract, which by law is the longest contract we can establish for teachers, then you'll know the number in December of the year before for the next 2 years.
That would be helpful.
Unless, and I have asked and I have tried to cajole the teacher negotiators to start in the fall, not the spring, because of this situation. Because then not only does it cause issues here, but it causes issue when we issue contracts now that are based on last year's salary. So we have to reissue contracts once we settle, and we have always done retro, which means we gotta then calculate what it was they should have been getting since September 1. So it's always a hard for everybody to not have a contract in place in the spring of the year. Absolutely,
yeah. I think we should talk more about Jay's idea, too, of some sort of fixed amount. I don't know if it would, there are always going to be things that change, but it's something to consider for planning purposes.
you're getting asked all these questions because I know that as a counselor, it was frustrating to look at your school budget and not be able to pick out changes and be like, hey, maybe you can do this. As taxpayers, it's frustrating because you want to make sure your money's going to where you expect it to be. And as a parent with kids in school, I expect that, and like LEPAC, that if I'm going to give you a bunch of money, that my kid gets some art supplies, and that teachers aren't digging into their own pockets to buy Kleenex and markers and crayons. That's stuff that you should already have. And we want our teachers to get paid, but it has to be consistent. If there's a formula that we can find that gets us to that mark, that you know what to expect and we know what to expect for years to come, because you've had contentious budget years. And I'm hopeful that over the last 2 years, it hasn't been that way, and that we've had more dialogue. We have more dialogue today than we've ever had. Like,
With the school.
oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not, and it's not contentious. We all have the same goal. We just don't always have the same ideas on how to get to that goal. And I hate goals. Goals, if you don't get there, you sort of fail. And really, I think you should change them to objectives. You really want to have objectives because those change over time. But I think that we're close. I think that we're going to figure it out. I can't imagine that you're going to get every part of that ask, but I think that we're going to get there, and we want our teachers to get paid. And
I want to say one more thing, which is to acknowledge the trauma of the pandemic over the last 2 years for schools. And I think that's important to recognize. We know, I mean, I don't know, you teachers and administrators know, and parents, much better the impact that it's had on kids in school. And I'm sure there are many needs that have arisen that were, unknown. Fortunately, there is the CARES money to address that, but I agree with Jay. It's hard to know from looking at this budget what goals and what programs are being met that will really help with recovery for student learning and social emotional health. So that would be something that also would be great to know more about in future.
You know, at one time we offered, this was many years ago, and I think it was when we were having tumultuous relationships with each other, that we offered city councilors the opportunity to come in and take a tour and during the school day, so you could see what was going on, some of the special programming that was going. For instance, I'd love to be able to take you into the computer science program, which has now been funded 4 years by the Harold Alphon Foundation. They paid for the teacher, the materials, and all of that, and we've got our first 4th year class coming next year, and that's all based on them going out into the community and finding internships so that they put those skills to work. It's a wonderful program. And I was going to say this earlier when someone asked about driver ed, did you consider that a success? I think Brian Laramie, the high school principal, told me we put 140 kids the first year through driver education.
And that's huge. I know, because I work with youth development organizations, and that's what they're looking for funding for right now, is driver's ed, because kids don't have the money and they don't have parents to do the hours. And so it really is an awesome program to support. Thank you.
thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you.
Anybody else got questions for the school board? All right. No? Oh, yes, absolutely. Please do.
Amy Murphy, Ward 2. I just want to thank you for talking about the schools. I agree there's a lot of social emotional health that needs to be addressed, And I would love to also see where our money is going to those pieces, along with the teachers. I mean, I've said time and again that our teacher salaries need to come up. So I appreciate that work and hope to see more numbers and how that is really going to help our students. So thank you for thinking about that.
Thanks for coming. Eric, I'm sure we'll send you a number here when you'll know next week, next day or so.
Yep, next Tuesday.
But
Slow down a little after tomorrow. I'll be waiting on the phone.
all right. Well, we cleared the room.
Yeah.
Nice. On to the ambulances. No, you're good.
We don't feel slighted at all.
Not at all. No.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Joan Phillips Sandy did have her hand up during that conversation.
Please
I
let her-
wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
Oh.
Let her speak.
Oh, crap. I don't appear to have the control to be able to do that.
Sorry, Joan. Yeah, but we had somebody else at the helm that moment.
Don't, so,
He can't bring her in.
Chad,
I
can
mean-
you bring her in with that control?
Maybe. Maybe, Chad. Hold on. Oh,
allowed to talk. Here we go.
there we go. We got you.
Okay.
What's the other hand?
Thank
Oh,
you.
that's hers.
I'm there.
You're here.
Yes.
Okay, great. Listen, just want to address a couple of things that came up at the school thing. In terms of how the budget reflects meeting the needs of students, I mean, a couple of things. One of the things we had a real problem with were lack of ed techs. So we passed a new negotiated a new contract, which is part of the cost increase in this budget, and it's to bring up ed tech salaries. Same with teacher salaries, and then the other two big drivers in the budget were the insurance, and then there was the plowing, which I understand you're taking back. You know, there's sometimes a sense that the only thing that really counts is direct in the classroom aid. And I do understand that perspective. But for example, Eric is the homeless liaison. That's part of the job that used to belong to the assistant superintendent when we used to have one. We have 60 homeless students in our district. We have a pot of grant money from the state to serve them, but we need somebody to actually deal with those homeless kids. That's going to be one of the tasks of the assistant superintendent. Another thing is we need to be able to recruit and develop plans to meet the educational deficits and the social emotional learning needs of all the students coming out of the pandemic. That's going to be on the assistant superintendent's plate. But you need, in order to get something into the classroom, you need somebody developing it, recruiting for it, monitoring it, measuring its progress. And that's going to be on the assistant superintendent's plate. Professional development for all staff. We have a wonderful person working on professional development, but this will broaden our reach and our capacity to do things. Eric works really hard and he does a really good job, but there's an awful lot of stuff that could also be being done. Networking in the community, networking with our colleges, he spends a lot of time dealing with parent-student issues. A lot of that can be put on the plate of the assistant superintendent. So although you can say, well, it's just another administrator, it's another administrator that is going to lead to better results in terms of direct results in the classroom. And just one final little piece, and I definitely don't want to get us hung up on this, but Monday night was the first time we ever heard there was an issue with the art budget. The way the budget gets presented is it comes from the school building to Eric to the board. They point out any major changes or problems. My understanding is that line didn't change, it didn't get cut, it's been satisfactory in the past, and in fact was not even fully spent in the past. This is the first time I heard there was a problem. I like to think we'll do better going forward, but we can't do things we don't know about. And I appreciate that it was brought to our attention, and I understand there's a parent group that's going to work on trying to raise some money, and I've already recommended a grant funding source to them, and I assure you that I hope it will be considered more carefully next time. But it's not like we cut art. That's not what we do. We generally do not cut art, and we generally do not cut music. So just want to make that piece really, really clear. And then if there's any other questions, here I am for,
So,
answer anything else.
Joan, I don't want to argue, but I will tell you that and everyone knows that we've wanted to make sure that our teachers are paid. I think everybody agrees. It's no
Yes.
secret that I believed that we needed a superintendent, at least an assistant superintendent. The job is really too big for one person. I understand that you've added techs, but your top 3 or 4 items that you mentioned were people, not resources for students. Where I understand that you didn't cut the art budget, but Clepac's got some numbers where they're essentially getting what, like 12 cents worth of stuff per class?
Yeah, no, that's appalling. I was appalled when I heard that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's probably the number that's probably the number that's been in that budget for a really long time, because I don't remember ever cutting that budget. And I don't know. The other thing is that I don't know is sometimes things are in more than one line. What I don't know is whether that's the absolute full budget for absolutely everything. And I don't know that one way or the other. But I know that sometimes things cover more than one line, and I do not have the book in front of me, so I really can't even begin to answer that. Yeah, but I know what you're saying. It's about paying teachers more, paying ed techs more, but that's how we deliver services in the classroom, is with these people. I do hear what you're saying, though, about the supplies and everything. I get it. I get it. But as far as I know, we have not been cutting supplies.
But you understand that you just said that that 2,000 may not reflect the entire art budget because it may be in some other line. And
Yeah, and I don't know that. I don't know that.
because that's not transparency.
Well, sometimes there's a difference between consumables and permanent things. Sometimes there's a difference between, stuff you buy that you expect to have for years to come and stuff you buy that's consumed in 1 year. Sometimes they're on different lines. I'll tell you what, the stuff and those lines, I don't know if you have a book in front of you with our whole budget, but the lines come from the state. They are not our creations. The state tells you where you have to put every specific item, and they are very, very detailed. And like we will find things like an ed tech salary for the hall school will drop, but then an ed tech salary for the junior high will increase. And what you learn is the reason is the student who that ed tech covers is moving from the hall school to the junior high. So that's why it's coming out of this budget and into that budget. Or you learn that consumables go here and, permanent stuff goes here, or if it's electronic, it goes on this line. But these are not our designations. These are the state's designations. There's a whole handbook that Paula has to work with when she's putting the budget together to make sure she gets everything on exactly the right line and spends it out of the right line. It's extraordinarily complicated if you've ever seen our entire budget book.
So I got you on record as agreeing that the $2,000 that the art department is getting for a budget for that school is gross.
Well, it seems like a little. What I'd like to know is, though, what has been spent in the past by that department and whether or not there's money for that program in other lines that I'm not aware of. But if the total budget for all of those students is $2,000, I'm going to agree that that seems awfully low.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm gonna,
Joan,
hold on.
I wasn't-
Clepac, hold on. Counselor Green was going, then you can go.
I just want to make a really quick point here, because I hear what you're saying, of course, about the need for the additional administrative position, and I need to point out that the city cut 14 of the positions that it wanted at a total of 1.2 million. Most of those are administrative. And so the priority was put on wages for existing workers. And I guess, you know, if you know me, you know I am all for education and for the schools, but it is sometimes a matter of priorities. And I really, I want to see the teachers get paid decent wage. We looked at 60 to 75% with our salary study for city workers, trying to get them to within the 75%, and we cut them down to 60. So, I mean, everyone has made sacrifices here, and yeah, I just needed to say that because.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, and I don't think we would have proposed the assistant superintendent if it had to come out of the regular budget. If we couldn't find another way to fund it that is generally not available for other routine funding things, you know, I definitely hear that. I do note that the city hired an assistant city manager. And from what I understand, that's making a very positive difference in terms of getting things done on the city side. I had a very nice note from one of the counselors telling me that.
Yeah, I think that I would agree. That's very true. Thank you, Bill. And but we did hire the city manager and then the assistant. Anyway, I don't want to belabor it, but I just wanted to mention about the whole picture of the city and what the priorities really are that we're looking at.
And we understand that we can't tell you how to spend it, but we can control how much of it we give to you.
Absolutely, that has always been the case.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Go to Tom.
Go ahead,
Thanks.
Klepak.
You guys are going to get on to ambulances, and I'm going to get on to dinner.
Well, I'm gonna let Klepak ask his question, then we're gonna move on to ambulances.
Oh, okay. I'll wait.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't want to divert from the point that Councilor Green is making. I actually want to amplify that point. But I just would add the comment that I wasn't suggesting that the art budget was in any way cut. I don't think that is obviously a priority of the board or anything like that. What I would simply point out is that, you know, we have that particular position has a new instructor in that role. And perhaps the previous instructor, I don't know anything about how the previous instructor ran that, but yeah, I also, the reports that I've heard from that have been that is the totality of the resources that are available. I mean, there are other resources like the ability to use photocopiers and et cetera, that go beyond that budget. But in terms of consumable materials, art supplies for the classroom, that's what that person has to work with. And I also know that they were not engaged in any kind of budget recommendation process. I imagine because the administration at that school quite responsibly was trying to keep their ask as trim as possible. But, you know, there has to be an acknowledgement of what pressures that puts on the people in those roles to deliver the content.
No question, Tom. And it's a new principal in that building this year also. What I do wonder, though, is were there enough supplies this year?
We don't know.
I know it was a struggle for that instructor. I do know that as well.
Listen, I don't know about anybody. We're going to go to a break here, but I have 4 children, 3 of which are 14 and under. And in my household, I can assure you that I spent at least half of that amount on art supplies. Easy.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. My grandson loves art, and I totally get it. but like I say, I hope in a future budget it will be addressed.
I hope so
This
too,
is
because I'm going to be at
literally
that budget
the
meeting.
first time in 20 years I've ever heard that in 26 years that I've ever heard anybody complain about the art budget.
Thank you, Joan. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to come
I'm
back
gonna
to
go
the
have dinner.
ambulances.
Thank you, guys.
Let's
All right, we're back. Steve, lead us on the discussion.
I am going to give you an overview of where we've been, where we are, and where we plan to go with the fire department's EMS service. Chief Essler is here with me also. He's going to take over when I get to a certain point in this presentation, and if you have any detailed questions, I'm sure he's going to be happy to answer them for you. So, beginning with this slide, we're really talking about the emergency medical services for the Waterville Fire Department. The EMS goals start with maintaining the current level of service, which is critical in the mind of the chief and my mind as well, and I believe yours also. That current level of services is 2 ambulances dedicated to Waterville responding to current and projected emergency callouts. The second goal is to continue a working relationship with Delta Ambulance. We've worked hard on attempting to put together a program between us that can carry into the future. At this stage, where we sit is that Delta is willing and able to serve in a mutual aid capacity to the city, but not to dedicate any staff or vehicles to Waterville. The third goal is to maintain the Waterville Fire and Rescue's capacity to provide adequate fire protection, rescue, and fire prevention services. And the chief can talk to you about how the EMS services and these fire-related services couple together. The fourth goal is to maintain the department's capacity to provide effective fire and EMS mutual aid as a regional partner. That's critical in our area where Waterville is a service center city. The municipalities around us and beyond them don't have the level of services that we have for EMS. Only Winslow, adjacent to us, has ambulance capability on a regular basis. Beyond that, one has to go to Clinton to get that service. And then the fifth goal is to avoid excessive dependence on fire and EMS mutual aid to cover routine callouts. And that focuses on our not putting the city at risk, the city's occupants at risk, by not having the adequate resources to be able to respond quickly, but having to call on other municipalities to come to Waterville to either support our department by standing by in our station or by responding directly to calls. So it's important that we have the adequate capabilities to avoid doing that. The overview of our whole EMS operation starts for this presentation in the period before 2019. At that point, Delta Ambulance was providing all the services to the city. Between 2019 and 2020, Delta was still the primary ambulance and Waterville Fire was the secondary responder. Between 2020 and 2022, Delta remained as the primary responder. Waterville was a secondary responder, and then Waterville also was in a backup capacity to those 2 ambulances. That's the partnership that we have been working under until just recently. Since that time, starting in July, that configuration that I just described is going to change because Delta has withdrawn from its agreement with us. Their reasoning is something that we understand. We think it's very unfortunate, but they've told us that they just don't have the manpower or staff to dedicate people and a vehicle to Waterville. So specifically within that explanation is that services being provided by Delta currently are 2 Delta EMTs, 1 paramedic and a vehicle, billing and collection services, quality improvement services, and training services. But what happens after July 1st? Those things go away. And at that point, all of it falls on Waterville Fire. Our proposal is to add 2 firefighter paramedics per shift. That's a total of 8. Add 2 administrative staff to do the following things: manage the EMS service, oversee billing and collection, perform quality improvement in-house, and perform training for fire and EMS in-house. Looking ahead, the demand for service indicators that we see are an aging population with 911 calls and transports increasing in number, with the local population growth and housing that's being built now that is going to exceed our current demand, and college enrollments that are increasing in a significant way, particularly with Colby. Then on to regional population growth. We have developing suburbs all around us, and a lot of the people who are moving to this area seem to be settling in Winslow and Sydney and yes, sir, and Oakland. And it's going to continue in that trend. Nope, pardon me, went too far. And then finally, where we are a service center city, we get an influx of population during business hours and during the evening as well, because of all of the services that we provide for consumers. So all of those things are going to have an impact on our demand for services. The chief has put together an analysis ranging from 1995 to 2021, showing what the difference is between the trends in fire calls and EMS calls. The upper blue line is the trend line for the growth in EMS calls. That is something that is affecting us every day, every week. The ratio right now is 77% EMS and 23% fire. That's pretty consistent throughout the years, but as you can see, the EMS growth trend is growing faster than the fire response trend. Moving on to the EMS response growth in the last 2 years, for the first 5 months of the year, you can see that in 2022, that growth curve is escalating even over 2021.
Due to an aging,
Pardon me?
due to aging? Sorry. Due to aging, an aging population?
I don't think that growth there accurately represents an aging demographic.
Yep.
That is because in 2021 and 2020, remember, we were call sharing with Delta, so we
Oh, yeah.
weren't responding to all the calls in the city of Waterville.
Yep.
So in 2022, now we are capturing all of the call volume.
10-4.
Moving on, today's staffing in the management category includes a chief and a deputy chief, and then we have 3, I'm missing a person here, 4 firefighters on duty and 2 EMS staff on duty, along with 2 Delta people on duty. And the chief can talk to you about how consistently Delta has performed there. This is our current staffing. On a per shift basis, the management team is on duty during the day, 5 days a week, but the chief will tell you that they're often out responding to EMS calls and doing other things 24/7. Moving forward, this is the configuration that I showed you earlier, with Delta withdrawing its participation in July of 2022. And after July 1st, we'll have 1 Waterville Fire ambulance, a Delta ambulance in a mutual aid capacity. We propose to add a second 24/7 Waterville ambulance, and then a third ambulance that you have already authorized the purchase of will be held in reserve to do interfacility transfer calls and to pick up the 911 calls that the other 3 units can't take care of. So the staffing plan today is what I had showed you previously, and the staffing plan July 22 not only has the existing staffing, and pardon me, I missed one here, but we're adding to that 2 fire medics. Is that right?
Yeah, they'd be firefighter EMTs or firefighter paramedics, whatever we
Okay.
can hire.
Yeah. And we're also adding a deputy chief for EMS and a training officer for the department.
And just one comment before you move
Go ahead.
on. The slash mark through one of those firefighters is an indication of minimum staffing. So oftentimes, if somebody was to call in sick or somebody was to take vacation, we drop one firefighter on a normal day. So that represents minimum staffing requirements.
Okay.
Okay, and the cost impact on this
Well,
shows...
Hold on, Steve. Counselor Green?
yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the extra 2, the blue figures, that would be per shift, right?
Yes.
Additional 2 per shift.
That is
So
correct.
that's 8 in total, right? So this would be 1 shift you're showing here,
That's correct.
and then we'll have 4. Okay.
That's correct.
Then the cost impact is calculated at $1.72 million with projected revenue of $1.25 million, showing a net cost of $461,000. That is built into the budget that we just talked about before the school department was speaking. The chief is going to take over now.
There's 2 slides that we would find helpful just to show you how we position our firefighters on our fire trucks. Today, we have a battalion chief that's in a supervisor's vehicle. We run 2 fire engines. You can see that the first fire engine is our tower truck. It has 1 person on it. The red in bold underneath it indicates, again, that minimum staffing. Our second engine has 2 firefighters on it. Our first ambulance has a firefighter and a Delta provider on it currently, and our second ambulance has a firefighter and a Delta provider on it currently. And all we're asking to do in additional staff is just to replace the Delta providers that won't be there. So we're not asking for, other than the 2 administrative positions, for anything more than we currently have. Yep. And this is, this slide here just indicates if we didn't do anything at all, that I would not have the staff to provide effective mutual aid, and our fire protection would be significantly reduced. As you can see on those days where there would be, a person on vacation, I would only have the capacity to staff my supervisor on a fire truck, which is the most complex fire truck in our fleet, which would be not conducive to our operation at all. So this will be our transition period, and we'll be looking at overtime to maintain some minimum staffing until we get people hired. But this just also demonstrates the importance of getting a hiring process started as quickly as possible.
Can we take this down now so I can see counselors' hands?
Say it again?
Can we take down the question, take this down so I can see the people? Stop sharing.
How's that?
Better. All right. Questions? Oh, I was going to say, because that would have been way too easy. Counselor Frankie.
So the net cost of your expansion of the fire department is you're projecting to be about $500,000. This is if we didn't do the expansion, that would take the $500,000 pressure off the budget, which would allow us to go ahead and fund the schools as well as add a couple of the other positions that we've cut out, such as the code enforcement officer, support staff for public works, and for the human resources department. It seems to me that those are our priorities: is the schools, the housing, and infrastructure. It seems to me that that's the direction we should head.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Anybody else? Tom, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just would point out to Councilor Frankie that while all the things that you mentioned are important priorities, we're talking about emergency responders. For a functional community, there is a hierarchy of needs. The things you're mentioning is certainly important, but you know, you're laying on your back in cardiac arrest. You want someone to be able to be there to transport you to the medical care that you need. We're talking about like baseline functional emergency response in Waterville. This is what I would see as an extremely high priority. Not to like discount those other issues, but emergency response is like a non-starter for a community. We have to have a robust emergency response.
And just to answer your concerns, Tom, is we have a private company that's been in town for 50 years that's been providing that service. So I really don't see why Waterville needs to step in and take over regional service, regional ambulance service.
We have a local provider, a private provider that is in distress. Is the problem? It's true they've been around for a long time. Sears and Roebuck had been around for a long time. Kmart had been around for a long time. Kmart is now no longer in Waterville. Private businesses come and go. The need for basic emergency services continues.
Councilor Foss.
In an odd twist of budget negotiations, I'm in agreement with Councilor Klepek. I can't imagine ever looking away from EMS services to fund other services, especially in, you know, I'm getting older, I'm not getting any younger. You know, there's going to be a day that Chief may have to put the paddles to me, and I'm hoping that he's funded to put the paddles to me.
I'll pay you to put the paddles to him now.
No, you cannot pay to put the... And that went sideways quick.
Councilor Green.
So I appreciate the PowerPoint. Thank you for putting it together. And one of the things that you reminded us of is the increased housing that we're talking about in the city. And while this, you know, and of course it's not ready yet, but estimates are that there are 400 units in the works in Waterville right now. And hopefully in the next year or two, they will be filled with people. And they won't all be new people to Waterville, but our hope is to increase our population. And I think that's another reason why we want to be prepared with an emergency service that can handle that, as well as the growing numbers of people that are going to come into the city, especially when the Ship Center is finished, et cetera. So I do think it's important that we are prepared within the city. At the same time, I think it's essential that we be looking at working with other towns and partners like the hospitals to really come up with a regional solution. And I know we've talked about that. I just want to put that out there as an end goal for us to be working with the communities around us as well.
Councilor Frankie.
This is a budget issue. It's not a emergency preparedness issue. We're currently looking at ways to manage the budget, and it seems to me that spending an extra $1.5 million on an emergency service, a private emergency service just run by Waterville Fire, is not cost effective. Might be easier just to ask Delta if we paid them $250,000. Would that be enough for them to dedicate an ambulance to Waterville?
Sounds like a staffing issue, though.
Could we get the Chief Essler to address this question about the capacity of Delta?
Thank you, Tom. We've met with Delta several times over the last couple weeks, and we've had a very, very good conversation, very open, very honest, and very transparent. And they were very clear with us that they could effectively staff 2 to 3 ambulances 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for their coverage area with their current full-time staff. They also indicated that they had some administrative staff and some per diem positions to help increase that number. But the common description is they do not have the staff to provide the effective services to the city of Waterville. And in my opinion, it is not as a result of financial hardship at Delta Ambulance.
Any other questions? All right. Oh, Claude, go ahead, Councilor Frankie.
So the short answer, Chief Essler, is that you never approached Delta with an offer of support in return for a dedicated ambulance?
Myself, Billy, and the city manager had 2 meetings with them specifically requesting if they could dedicate an ambulance to the city of Waterville, and in both circumstances, they advised they would not.
And if I may,
with an offer to for Waterville to pay for the ambulance.
Can you repeat your question, Counselor?
Did you ask Delta if they...
You asked
Go ahead.
you asked Delta if they would dedicate an ambulance if Waterville paid for it.
no, we didn't do that, but we did ask them what would work for them, what it would take for them to stay in the partnership, and they were silent. They just kept repeating that we don't have the staff to be able to do it. So our impression is that they've turned their backs and they're not going to turn around again.
Well, one comment I do want to add, Counselor, is we tried to ask Delta to provide us with medical billing services, with quality improvement, with educational services in our conversations, and we did offer to pay for those services to reduce the administrative burden on the fire department. And again, 2 meetings, I asked the same questions in both of them. In both circumstances, they declined to offer those services as well, even when we discussed paying for those.
And just one final question for you, Chief. In the newspaper, it was reported that Delta decided to terminate the agreement with Waterville because Waterville had been hiring away Delta paramedics. How many former Delta employees have you hired, and are you planning to hire in the expansion plan that you proposed?
Well, there are no future plans or a script to hire Delta employees. As soon as I have the authorization from the city manager, we'll be posting those positions. They'll be able to apply, and we will evaluate those applications as they come in. To answer your first question, we did recently hire 4 employees from Delta Ambulance, 3 of which were already on our call force, and they decided that they wanted to come work for us. It's very important that the council understands that all 4 of these people are coming to the city of Waterville, and they're going to take a pay cut. So one of the things that was alluded to in the newspaper was that we created this contract that was just right out of this world, and the truth is we hired one of the supervisors was making $31, $32 an hour and is going to come to Waterville Fire Department taking a $6 an hour cut. This is not an issue in regards to better pay or better benefits for these particular employees. This is just simply an issue where we have a great workforce and we're fortunate to attract the best quality staff.
It's funny, I always talk about how Rebecca and I go back and forth and we have these conversations, and she asked me a pretty funny question the other day at our meeting. She says, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I told her, really neither. It's not about being right. It's not about being happy. Do I feel validated when things that I wanted to see come to fruition Yeah, I mean, I have objectives that I want to see. We've talked about revenue. And when we talked about revenue, we talked about the fact that it wasn't meant to make enough revenue to pay for all of it and then give us some extra. It was really about making sure that it offset the cost of the fire department. I mean, we looked at the numbers. What was your fire department budget in 2018?
I
It was
don't have that
$2.3
in
million.
front of me. I apologize. 2.8 million.
2.3, I believe. Do we still have that? Oh,
No, I think.
You probably asked me the only question I couldn't
it's
answer
okay.
tonight.
We've got some other stuff here.
We've got 19, 20 at 2.2.
Okay, so it was 2.2, and today it sits at what? Total budget? Would be 4.8?
3.
We're not going to break even. We never did. Even when Delta was providing the service on their own, we were still sending Waterville personnel to each and every call. And on many occasions, we waited for an ambulance to come. None of us this isn't ideal. We went into this looking as a backup service. We knew the possibility that we may have to step into this 4 years ago. We knew. We could see the writing on the wall. We talk about the employees that we have taken from Delta, yet we're paying them less, and they're still coming. Other fire departments in the region have hired away their employees. It's not us. I mean, the narrative looks that way. What? It's not only us. I know it looks that way. But at every corner, we have made attempts to create a partnership that could work and work for the state. It didn't work out this time, but we're not done. It doesn't mean that this relationship is over. It just means that the relationship has changed. At no point do I want Delta to disappear. Delta is a valuable service for this community, for this region. The only thing we are doing at this point is propping them up so that they can go off to these other communities and take care of them. Is it going to cost us a little bit more money? Yep. I think he says 500,000. I think it's closer to 350.
In the end, yes.
Yep.
That is the amount of money it costs us to be ready. Like the moment something happens or the shoe drops, we're ready to go. That's what we're asking the taxpayer for. And I think that is a decent ask. This ambulance service is never going to pay for itself completely. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if it does, it's a miracle, and it's because we're doing so many interfacility transfers that it makes it worth it. But this isn't about money. It may seem like it is because we're talking about budgets. But it's about the quality of service that we are going to provide to our residents. And if we do nothing, we can't provide that quality of service. Neither can the other company that you want to provide that service. On their own, they cannot do it. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And this is the best outcome that we can come up with right now. Does that mean that we can't have further negotiations and conversations with Delta? No, that doesn't. We're just continuing what we need to do for our residents. And I want to make sure that the next time I have a heart attack, because it's going to happen, probably at one of these meetings, that someone's going to show up and take me to a hospital. Right? I say, he jokes about the paddles. I'm getting them. This is not only about money. It can't be. It must be about the safety of our citizens and the safety of the people that come to visit our community. Period. That's it. That's all I got. Go ahead, Claude.
Well, just one final comment, Mr. Mayor, as that was a beautiful speech about being prepared for emergencies. And there's no question that I want the city to, the people in Waterville to be covered by emergency service. But certainly right now we're talking about budget issues. And what's on the table is a complete change in the structure and mission of the fire department. When we started down this road in 2019, the fire department was just the fire department. And now we're being asked to change it into a fire department that provides emergency medical transport for the entire region. That's a major change. That's the kind of thing that probably should have been talked about in a public hearing. We had a meeting last week, which could have been a public hearing, but instead was put into an executive session where the chief made his excellent presentation, but it was an executive session. It was in secret. There has been no public debate about this. I still think we're getting ahead of the game.
You may be right. We may be ahead of the game, but we have to do something. Doing nothing and sitting on our hands is not an option. We are the only municipality our size that does not transport its residents. Except Lewiston, sorry. And I'm not gonna beat up on Lewiston. I know what you're saying, Claude, and I get it. I don't want to spend a ton of money to make this happen, but we're going to spend. We're going to spend it. It's there. They're going to offset some of it, and I would beg to differ that we have always done EMS in this community. The difference is we couldn't move a patient, and that was detrimental to our citizens. Councilor Klepak.
Yeah, I mean, one of the points that was made during that executive session, there were a couple important points that I think can be discussed publicly here. One of them is that servicing surrounding communities serves Waterville as well. People that live in Waterville aren't always in Waterville. They spend a lot of time in the surrounding communities. And if a medical emergency happens there, that's a Waterville resident that is being served by by the emergency response based here in Waterville. Secondly, to echo the mayor's point, this is a service. It is a service. So even Delta is a nonprofit organization, providing emergency service, however that happens, is not, is not considered a money-making proposition. We heard about how it is in one way or another subsidized, whether it's Maine General through its usage of Delta subsidizing Delta, or the city with the chief here. And then a further point, sure, Chief Essler's, primary task is managing fires, but it is his job to address emergencies and keep the city, the residents of Waterville, as they live in central Maine, safe, and be able to provide the kind of emergency services that they need. If Delta is, for whatever reason that we don't need to get into, if they are, after a long run of providing service in one manner, is not able to meet the demand, it behooves the city to make sure that that gap is closed. We don't necessarily need to have a long discussion as to, why Delta is going through whatever transitions it may be going through, et cetera. Certainly the employees that are working for the city that had been formerly working at Delta chose of their volition, for whatever reason, and it certainly was not for base salary, to come and work on the chief's team. That's not us poaching people from Delta. Of course, we want, whatever scenario is going to be sustainable for the long term to meet the challenges, the changing dynamic here in Waterville.
Councilor Frankie? Don't worry about it.
You make some excellent points, Tom, and as I said, it's providing service to the folks in Waterville is what's paramount. However, we don't have anyone at the meeting here from Delta to explain their side of the story. We had Dr. Pai at the meeting, at the council meeting last week in the executive session, so nobody in the public got to hear what he had to say. We don't have anybody from the public to speak at the meeting tonight to let us know what the public has to say. So while we may make some speculations, and certainly the city manager has been good at speculating, but we don't have a whole lot of real input from the public, and I think before we make a major change in structure and mission for the fire department, that we should find out what the people think. It could well be that the citizens of Waterville are 100% in favor of subsidizing emergency medical transport. I don't know that answer because we haven't had a public meeting. That's all I'm suggesting is let's find out what the public has to say.
Councilor Gray.
I do think that's a good idea. You're right, Claude. We haven't had a public hearing on this question, and it is a dramatic change in our budget. As the PowerPoint showed, though, EMS calls have increased significantly. So the mission of the fire department is changing because the needs of the city is changing, it seems to me. This is a big step, right? I mean, the rise in cost this year is 61%. The net cost is 38%. So there is a significant offset in revenue, but make no mistake, this is a big deal. And so we should have the public be aware of it and provide input before we make our decision.
All right. Meeting's
Could I-
over.
could I
Sorry,
ask-
I didn't see your hand. It was kind of blending in. Go ahead.
Could we ask the chief if he has any thoughts on the comments made by Dr. Pei last time? Do you have any further thoughts on what he had to say?
Yeah, I certainly ain't in a position to put words in Dr. Pei's mouth at all. I think Dr. Pei came into our executive session to help us paint a picture of what was going on in the region. Although the executive session was, really geared toward discussion around the contract, Dr. Pei presented an ideal situation. He presented some of the needs of the region. What Dr. Pei didn't have was a plan for the city of Waterville to move forward and address this issue. So after the meeting, him and I had discussed, and I said, well, Dr. Pei, what is your plan? And he said, give me 24 hours and I'll get back to you. He got back to me within 24 hours after having a discussion with the executive director of Delta Ambulance and a learning of Delta's current condition and their current ability to staff their commitments. And then he also talked to some colleagues of his as well. And he came back, and one of the statements that he made to me was, from the perspective of the city of Waterville, all indications are 2 ambulances are necessary. One of the things I hope Dr. Pei would have told the council, but we didn't get there because we ran out of time, was the importance of the administrative positions to create a department that is patient-focused. Now, we're already there. We've been doing EMS since the 1970s. This is not new to us. We have been one of the premier first response rescues in the state, the largest first response rescue in the state until 2019 when we got our transporting EMS license. And we've been actively running ambulances for over 3 years, which includes the acquisition of highly skilled and highly trained individuals. And the administrative staff are designed around ensuring the best patient care services we can provide.
Anyone else? All right, meeting
Oh,
adjourned.
looks like
Nope,
Mike
sorry,
wanted to
sorry.
say
I didn't see
something.
your hand.
No, it's fine. No, before we say meeting adjourned, I think it's, yep, it is. Thank you. I just turned it on. But you're right. You caught me. I almost caught me there. We're coming back here in, what's today, Thursday? 3 days? 4 days?
Yep.
To, as I understand, take a first read on the budget.
Yep.
Right? So, like, this is a budget workshop. We heard some presentations that kind of fit this budget. So, do we have any direction as to the fact that we have $191,000? Like, are we gonna, like, what are we expecting to come to on Tuesday? Is the direction of the council to say, Steve, we're going to throw in the $100,000 for paving, that gives it 91,000. The school's going to eat 91,000, and we're going to vote on zero. Like, it's going to be flat. Like, what are we looking at here? Because we're going to have this discussion in 4 days.
Well,
So
I would say that the school asked you for 1.14. They seemed amenable to taking only the 940, which would get you to zero right now, or close to. Now, some of you are going to have some other things that you may want to play with that day, but I think that giving the school that $940,000 is going to reduce that number for you to zero.
Okay.
So I would expect that you will have a budget in front of you that shows what we're willing to give, what we're able to give to the school this year to help them. And that it's gonna come back looking zero. Well, not zero, just you're not up or down.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, Mike, and certainly my feeling is that we can't touch the mill rate at this point, and we need to get to zero, and I think we have to, as Jay said, meet the schools in the middle. And I'm in favor at this point of funding the ambulance increase. I don't see that we have any other choice.
No, I agree, and I think, I just want to be able to make sure that Steve, who's not paying attention,
Steve.
has a charge to say, okay, over the next 4 days, like, you're gonna have a conversation with Eric, you're gonna put, talk with Bill and, and say, okay, well, this is what we're doing, we're adding this $100,000 in, we're telling them they need to do that, like, and off they go, we have a budget.
Pay attention.
Bill heard me, I'm good.
Okay. No, Claude.
Well,
We just gave you some
just to
direction
make
for the
sure-
budget.
Just to make
Bill,
sure
for
everybody
you.
understands about the budget, in the sheet that Steve has presented to us this evening, we're looking at a mill increase in the mill rate. So we're going to raise taxes. We're going to take $2 million out of our reserve fund. After we took $750,000 out of the reserve fund last year, that leaves the reserve fund below what the city expects it to be, and that's before we decide whether we're going to add a little extra money for the schools. That's what I'm driving at is the massive increase in funding for the fire department is not sustainable.
I'm sorry, but I believe that at beginning of this budget, Councilor Frankie sat up there on that screen and said that we were going to have a mill increase, that we had paid people, that we were raising salaries, that we were doing all of this other stuff, and all of a sudden we're going to blame the fire department. No, it's all of it combined. It isn't just one thing. It's the schools, it's our salaries, it's partly the fire department, it's partly the police department, it's public works. We cannot lay this at the feet of one department. It's not right. I mean, I get it. You want to send quips and you say things occasionally, but you told us that we were looking at a mill increase. We're still at that mill increase. And we've managed to absorb all this other stuff that has to happen. And yeah, we took $750,000 out of fund balance last year. How much of that's going back this year?
Somewhere between 750 and $1 million. Somewhere between 750,000 and $1 million.
Okay, Councilor Green.
So right now, on the proposal, we've got an unassigned fund balance of 12.7%. Does that include the surplus from this year or not?
No.
So it would be, if what you're saying is correct, then it will be higher than 12.7?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you have to measure it against the budget that you're calculating against.
Right, of course.
So if you look at it as adding back into the fund balance that we're looking at now, it would move it upward from 12.7 to 13.3 to 13.7%, somewhere in that range.
Councilor Foss.
Claude, you and I usually see right eye to eye on budget season, if you can agree to that, right?
Oh, yeah.
There are
Yep.
things in this budget that make me cringe. There are things in this budget that make me happy. And then there are things that I think about with an aging population, the services that we have become accustomed to, the services that we have been accustomed to that are lagging. And then I think about my old man that comes over here and does his grocery shopping with my mom. And he's a diabetic. And he's a bad diabetic. And the number I hear at the end of the day, when all the bills are paid, is $350,000. If I had $350,000 in my pocket, I'd put it on the table for Chief right now, if he saved my old man. And that's all there is to it. The rest of it is negotiable. There is money in the schools that I think we can work on. Are we going to do it in 4 days? Are we going to do it in the first vote? Probably not. Is there money in the city budget? Sure, there's probably money sitting there still that we could do it. There's money, there's rainy day fund. That's why we have it there as a rainy day, because of the pandemic and all the other stuff that's gone along with it. But at the end of the day, if Esla comes to me and says, I need $350,000 to save a life, you're going to do more than save one life with it, I can guarantee you that. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
Meeting adjourned? Meeting adjourned?
Okay.